Welcome to today's video. Let's start off with explaining that I am a petrol head. I have petrol cars in the past. Now I currently do not own any petrol cars, but that's not saying that I won't ever in the future. But I'm also very much into electric cars, which is why this YouTube channel is dedicated purely to electric cars. And I'm into electric cars because of my environmental beliefs, and that's why I don't fully agree with running a petrol car. However, today's video we're going to be discussing, is it right to convert classic cars to electric vehicles, and why I'm kind of torn between the two. As always, I want you guys in the comments to comment below, are you team electric or are you team petrol? Which one would you keep at the moment? Would you want to convert it or would you want to keep it completely standard? I really want to know what you guys think. Now, it's not that commonplace. So let's firstly explain what an electric swap is, what an electric conversion is. It's basically swapping the drivetrain, so taking out the motor, the fuel tank, basically all the bits that are a typical combustion engine, and switching it for electric drivetrain, putting in motors. It may even be going as far as changing the dash to show, an electric dash. It could be a full conversion or a part conversion, but essentially you're taking out that petrol engine and swapping it for motors and batteries. Now, people do it for various reasons. Some people do it because the vehicle they own is a vehicle they want to use every day, and that old classic engine may not be an everyday engine that you can get full use out of it. It might be a terribly unreliable car that they can't get the full use out of it, so they may be converting it for that. They may just be converting it because they feel it's right to have it converted, and there is a whole host of ways of converting them which we'll get into in a minute. But what is a classic car? Well, a classic car is a car that is basically classic to anyone, whoever it is. Everyone will have their own unique and iconic classics. For me, an iconic classic is a Ferrari 250 GTO, and I'm going to be using this sample of this car. And no, maybe I should not be using a car that costs £38 million, but I'm going to be using this as an example anyway because it's a classic car for me. It's an iconic classic. No one can argue that 250 GTO Ferrari is a classic vehicle. Classic values depend on a lot of things. Obviously the condition, the mileage, the history, the provenance of the car, was it owned by a racing driver, stuff like that all factor into values. But mainly one of the big things of a classic car value is how original it is. So if you're swapping out the drivetrain for electric and you're permanently converting that, because as we'll move on to a minute, there is an option not to permanently convert it, you're affecting its total resale value of that vehicle. Now, bearing in mind, converting a classic car to electric doesn't necessarily have to affect its price, provenance or retail of being electric. It can be done in a way that will not affect the price. Perfect example here is what Aston Martin did with a DB6 Classic, and they converted that DB6 using the same engine mounts. Everything sits completely on its standard engine mounts. All the motors, batteries, etc. can be swapped back out to petrol, back out to electric. It's all been done correctly, safely, so it can be restored at any point. Essentially meaning that it can be going back to electric or basically petrol whenever they want, meaning that you would never know it had an electric powertrain in before, and you'd never know it had a petrol powertrain in before that. Now for me, this is the only way cars should be converted, especially if they're a classic with a bit of provenance in, where they might be worth a fair amount of money in the future. I mean, why would you want to buy an old classic petrol car, convert it to electric, but not have the engine on display, in a museum, in a case? We need to preserve a little bit of history, I think. Now, I'm not saying in 10, 20, 30, 40 years time, we're still going to be driving around in these classic cars with their petrol engines. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I don't think that there'll even be that many places you will be able to pick up petrol or drive them around. But what we should be able to think is, in 20, 30, 40, 50 years time, do we want these cars, these engines, to still be running? So every now and again, I don't know, once every 3 or 4 years, or once a year at an event, we can fire up these engines, listen to the wonderful noise they make, and drive them around a track and say to kids, hey, we used to have to drive to a location to put fuel in an engine to make it go around. We couldn't just do it at home or at the supermarket. We actually had to go to a special location that sold dead dinosaur juice and put it in our vehicles. It's part of history that we need to explain in the future. Now, we might never fire these engines up again, but if we have them and we can be working in 50, 60, 100 years' time, it's the history, the fact that we can do it. Because essentially, most of these classic cars, when they get very old, they're not going to be used. They're going to be museum pieces, article pieces, pieces to enjoy and look at. In fact, most people I know who own classic cars don't drive them at all. They're just parked in a garage, maintained, started once a year, and put back in the garage. Now, there's some classics that are terrible. They have terrible engines, they don't sound good, they don't look good, they're just awful, crappy engines. Perfect example of this, Land Rover Defender. This car is a perfect example to convert to electric and throw that engine away. It's a dirty diesel engine, it's horrid, it's not reliable, it doesn't sound good, it just doesn't do anything fun, it's not even powerful, it's just a crap engine. In my mind, some people will love it, but to me, this is an engine that I'd swap out, throw away, and convert to electric. In fact, an electric Defender is a perfect swap. I've seen them done before, and they look absolutely fantastic. In fact, Selfridges actually commissioned one and had one built. Now, my problem here is a lot of people who are converting cars from petrol to electric don't do enough engineering to work out how they'd ever turn the car back. They're drilling new holes, screwing new screws, changing the car's fundamental classicness to make an electric powertrain fit. If a kit is not reversible on your car and you think that your car is going to be worth some money in the future, consider that before you just pay someone to start cutting holes in your vehicle and making it unrecognizable to what it could be. If you think the shell of the car is going to be worth more than its provenance, the engine, etc., then go ahead and convert it. But really think, I mean, for example, you would not, in my mind, convert a Ferrari 250 GTO to electric, because the engine, the car, the sound, that is what the car is. That's its soul. However, if you're converting a Land Rover Defender, it hasn't really got much of a soul in my mind. You know, it's the shape of the vehicle. Or if you're converting a BMW Isetta, it's the shape, the bubbleness of the car. It's not the engine. So certain cars, it's about the car, it's about the engine, it's about the whole package. And others, it is just purely about the bodywork, the shell that's in it. But really consider that if you want to keep the engine and put it in a cabinet and save it to be put back in the car in the future in 20, 30 years time, when you've got another car to drive full time that's maybe a body of a classic that you're driving around, and you can have the proper petrol car sat in your house, sat in your garage, sat in a museum somewhere that future generations can look at and go, God, you craziness, Granddad used to drive around in a car that was powered by dead dinos. And that's what we need. We need to really consider the future of explaining to people what these were, and so they can look at them and so we can learn how far we've come. Now, as I've just mentioned, the car I'd like to convert is a BMW Isetta. What car would you like to convert? What car would you not ever want to see converted to electric? And I hope this video appeals to both my electric car audience and also to my petrolhead audience. Now, both audiences, you shouldn't clash, you shouldn't argue. The future is electric. You've got no choice, petrol heads. Get over it. It's coming. You just got to lump it and like it. Yes, they haven't got the same sound and they sound a bit different, but trust me, once you've driven an electric car, the sounds are different, but they're just as enjoyable. I enjoy driving a fast electric car just as much as I used to enjoy driving a noisy V12, V8 and all the other vehicles I've driven in the past. They're just as fun, they're just quicker, you hear different noises and you enjoy them just the same. But I do still like the sound of a grunty engine. But just face it, they're going away, but let's try and think about preserving them and also preserving the planet as we move towards electric vehicles. Thank you very, very much for watching this week's video. Don't forget to leave a comment down below about what you think will be a future classic. Thank you very, very much, and I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.